Welcome everyone to the Ontario Caregiver Organization's webinar series. These webinars bring together caregivers and subject matter experts to explore topics of interest to caregivers. We do this to support and engage chosen family, friends, neighbors, really anyone who's caring for someone else. My name is Katie Muirhead and I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. We begin this gathering by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. While we meet on a virtual platform with people joining us from across the province, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we each call home. The land that I'm standing on is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. As team members at OCO, we are learning about the lands from which we work and exploring how we can be meaningful allies and how we can support the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We invite you to take a moment to reflect on the land where you are. And if you're not familiar with that, we'll be sharing an interactive map that tells you which traditional territory your city or town sits on. You can find that at native-land.ca. Our webinar today is called Peer Support for Families of Persons with a Developmental Disability. Oftentimes, we hear caregivers share that they feel isolated and alone and that they don't know many other people that are caregiving. Peer support is a way for families and caregivers to find help and support from others in their community and to share information and build connections for their own well-being and the well-being of those they care for. Today, we're joined by a panel of caregivers who support people with developmental disabilities. Along with our strategic partnerships and innovation lead, Bianca Feidelberg, they will share their experiences seeking out peer support through family support networks, starting their own family support networks, and the overall benefits of peer support. I want to welcome our guests today. We have Sherron Grant, who is one of the founders of the Sawubona Africentric Circle of Support, Betty Daly, the president of Family Alliance Ontario, and Kim Guillemette, a busy and proud working mother to 3 boys. So I'd like to invite my colleague Bianca to join us now to share a little bit more about what peer support is and lead a discussion with our guests this evening.
Thanks, Katie, for that lovely introduction, and so pleased to have all of you joining here tonight. I am just going to spend a couple of minutes talking very broadly about peer support, and Katie did a great job of kind of introducing the topic here today, but just wanted to spend a few minutes chatting a little bit about I'm just going to try and move my slide forward. Give me 1 second. About sort of the different types of peer support that might be out there. So really, the one commonality around peer support when we think of peer support is lived experience. So really connecting with folks who have a similar or shared or lived experience as you might have. And many people out there might connect in different ways in terms of informal peer support. So that might look like calling on a friend, making a phone call, somebody who again has a shared or lived experience similar to yours, or a more formal type of support where, for example, here at OCO, we have a program that's designed to match folks with other caregivers who might have a similar experience and they're trained to be in that role. And they can offer peer support regularly on a one-to-one basis. And so then there's, as I mentioned, there's an opportunity for one-to-one peer support, but then there's also group support. And so we have a number of groups available here at OCO, but we're going to hear today from our guest speakers a lot more about their experiences of peer support and family support networks. So I'm going to take a moment just to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to suggest that my our colleagues or our guest speakers here today, Sherron, Betty, and Kim. If you want to come onto the video and join us for, and we can get started on our discussion. Hello, welcome. So pleased to have this opportunity to be chatting with you today, Kim, Betty, and Sherron. So I know that our guests are in for a really great discussion from all of you. And so, before we get started and we start talking about some of the benefits of peer support, things like that, I wonder if we could just start off hearing a little bit from each of you about, who you are and who you might support or care for. So Betty, would you want to start off and get us going here?
Sure. I'm Betty Daly. I live just north of Brockville. I've lived here my whole life. And I have 3 beautiful children. My oldest daughter, Brenda, who is just turned 50, has a significant disability. And she's lived with us her whole life up until about 10 years ago. And then just circumstances in our life made it so that we had to think about an alternative place to live. So we brought people together, and that's that networking piece. And Brenda now lives with a family, and she's lived there for 10 years. And that's worked extremely well. And it was somebody that has known her for over 25 years. So they invited Brenda to come and live with her and her husband, and it's worked well. I am the chair of Family Alliance Ontario, which is a provincial organization that provides advocacy and mutual support to families who have sons and daughters, sisters, brothers with disabilities across the province. And we're very excited to be a part of this webinar.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Betty, for sharing. And might I pass it over to Sherron? Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sherron Grant, and I'm the mother of 2 boys. My youngest one is 25 years old, going to be 26 next month. My, how time flies. And he's on the autism spectrum. He was diagnosed at the age of 4. So we've been on this journey now 21, 22 years. And I guess as a direct inspiration, as a result of the journey that I've been on, or that my husband and I have been on in raising our son, we decided to start our own Black parent support group. The reason being is just wanting to see more reflection, bumping into and meeting different families across our journey who themselves felt isolated, were kind of missing out on opportunities. And we thought, it might be a good idea to start to put our heads together and just kind of share the same experiences that we have as Black caregivers, because there is a bit of a nuance there in being a racialized caregiver and raising our racialized children. And it's blossomed over the few years that we've started the group. And we see that it's really meeting a need. It's meeting a need for us, but it's also meeting a need for the families that we've been able to connect with. And I'll be able to share more about that as the evening goes on.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Sherron. Welcome. And Kim, over to you.
Thank you, Bianca. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Gilmet, and I'm coming to you from Northern Ontario. I was born and raised in Timmins, Ontario, and I continue to live here. I am the mother of 3 boys. My 2 youngest boys, who are now 18 and 20, Joshua and Noah, are both affected by Fragile X syndrome and autism. In my professional life, I'm a lawyer, and I think that that's important. And we're going to talk a little bit later tonight about how to balance career and family and friendships. And hopefully we can help some of you navigate through that, whether you're new to this journey or whether or not you've been like us and a little bit more veteran. Hopefully we'll be able to help you. I am also the chair of an organization called Access Better Living here in Timmins, and we support many different individuals who have physical and developmental disabilities through various different programs. And I'm very excited to be a part of that organization. I've been a part of that organization for over 10 years. I plan on being a part of that organization for 10 more. So a couple of different parts of my life, my volunteer life, my personal life, and my professional life all sort of intersect, but it's also really important to keep some of that separate as well. So hopefully we'll help people here this evening to just kind of get a better grip on what's important in each and every one of your lives. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kim. That's great. It's so nice to hear a little bit about each of you and, who you support and who's in your life and your family. So thanks for sharing those pieces. I know that our, participants, attendees tonight are really probably keen to hear more about how perhaps you started or began to get involved in peer support and a little bit about of your peer support experience. So I don't know, Betty, if you want to just tell us a bit about, when did you first seek it out? What was it like? Tell us a bit about that, would you?
Sure. Well, I probably had because I'm a little bit older, I had probably a different introduction to peer support. Because my daughter attended back in the early 70s, middle 70s, she attended a self-contained classroom in a regular school, which at that time was a huge leap in integration and including people with disabilities in regular community life. And that's where I first received my mutual support, because we as parents banded together, and we really, I still see those people on a regular basis after, over 40 years. And that's where it all began. But certainly, because I've worked in the system for over 30 years, supporting other families, I didn't really get a mutual support feeling from that because I was in a professional role. So as a professional, and there's lots of us professionals out there who are parents or siblings and in a professional role, one of the barriers that creates is you can't be a part of and share as openly and as easily with people you support because you are in that professional role. So I, in the middle 80s, late 80s, I was introduced to Family Alliance Ontario. It wasn't Family Alliance Ontario then, it was the Family Support Institute, and it was under the umbrella of Community Living Ontario. And that's where I first began to get that mutual support from other families who were distant from me geographically. And I've, again, been involved with Family Alliance Ontario through the creation of Family Alliance Ontario and all of these years, where Family Alliance Ontario now is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. So I've been on the board or involved for most of that 25 years. And that really is where I get that mutual support, because you can't do this alone without connecting with other families who are experiencing some of the same things that we experience. Every experience is different. But if I say, I haven't been able to sleep, when Brenda was young, I used to sleep with a monitor because she had seizures. So I never got a good night's sleep ever. And I still don't sleep well because of that requirement of keeping an active eye on what's going on. And it's easy to talk to other families who are going through some of those similar things. And that's what's important to me.
Thank you so much, Betty. I mean, I just hear you talk about those connections that have lasted and all these years that you know have been involved with Family Alliance Ontario, and how much it's meant to you to find kind of folks who have commonality with you, right, in terms of being able to understand your experience. So thank you for telling us about that.
I do have a picture of my daughter who was, well, she was just entering school, so she was probably 6. And a friend of hers who is also 6. And then they, I still see him regularly today. I'm a part of his circle.
I love that. So that connection, those strong connections are there.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I wonder, Sherron, I know that you touched a little bit on your kind of reasons or what made you seek out peer support in your opening a bit, but do you want to tell us a bit more about that, your experience of seeking out peer support?
Sure. So our son was diagnosed in 2000. And by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm in Toronto. So I guess I'm kind of in the middle between my colleagues here on the screen tonight. But so he was diagnosed at the age of 4. And I remember that day, it was just a few days before Christmas. And it hit hard, I had my suspicions. I'd been taking him to speech therapy. We could see the struggle that he was having in the Sunday school program at our church. And so I knew that there was something going on, and a few good friends of mine, a couple of good friends of mine who themselves are retired teachers, they had a suspicion that my son was probably on the spectrum. So, they gave me some information, I looked it up, and, it's hard when you first read that, and then you get the diagnosis, and it's just, I felt like a dark cloud started to loom over my head. So I remember leaving the doctor's office and then basically saying, connect with Variety Village. That's an integrated gym facility in Toronto, kind of southeast end of Toronto. They mentioned the Geneva Center for Autism. I believe they mentioned Community Living Ontario. So they Community Living Toronto. And I was on my own from that point. So it was tough. Those first few months were quite tough. I think I kind of curled up like a ball emotionally, and just, my husband, I just didn't know how they handle it. But then I realized, what? Someone's got to get up off their knees and get out there and start to fight for our son. So that's, I was one that take the lead. And I think in most cases, it is the moms that take the lead. And I got connected with the parent support group at Community Living Toronto, their East chapter of Community Living Toronto. And it was wonderful. I was able to sit in a space with other moms, just like Betty was sharing, and share things, and they got it. They could finish my sentence. They could share similar stories. They understood about the sleepless nights. They understood about the journey of finding supports and resources and so on. They understood the journey of just trying to find other cheerleaders for your child, because sometimes it's tough for the family to understand and embrace that this family member of mine has a disability. And I think with something like autism, because I would call it an invisible disability, it was really hard for family and friends to think, well, no, you just need to be harder. You basically need to be a better parent. So often in the beginning, I was getting the blame that I wasn't strict enough, I wasn't structured enough, and so on. And it was really hard for them to understand, no, it's beyond me. It's neurological. It's just the hand that he's been dealt and that we've been dealt. And so to bring it now to current day, as I went over the years and going to different parent support groups and different seminars and workshops and so on, it was always great to be in those spaces, but there were some aspects of my journey as a Black parent, as a racialized parent, that those topics were not being talked about, navigating the school system and navigating the services system and just understanding how it works and understanding how to advocate, from my cultural lens. And I would meet so many other parents that look like me and have the same experience, but they were so disconnected and they didn't know where to turn and how to get those supports for themselves and for their children. They were feeling angry and frustrated. And so over the years, many of us were saying, it would be nice for us to have a group for ourselves where we could share our experiences on a whole other level, on a deeper level, on a more intimate level of being Black caregivers. And but it never happened. I saw other groups start up with regards to other races and other ethnic identities, but never anything for the Black community, at least nothing on a large scale. So, I spoke to my husband. I said, no, this is something I want to do, but I want to do with you because I think it would be important, again, for a mom and a dad, for some other fathers as well to, to see themselves as being a part of this journey and seeing the value that they have. And so we started this group in 2020, and it continues to be virtual because that works well. For family, you don't have to worry about commuting and parking and childcare. And it's been wonderful. We've been able to get families who are part of our group from across Ontario and even some from the United States who, again, have been looking for a similar space. Again, being a part of other groups, but there's just something missing. There's a comfort level, there's an acceptance and inclusion that they just felt was missing some of the other groups that they're a part of. And so not to say they dismiss the other groups they're a part of, but we are adding to that. There's more value add. We're increasing their resilience and their confidence and just lessening their isolation and knowing they don't have to go on this road alone. So it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but it's a little bit of my journey leading to now this journey that I'm engaging in, my husband and I, with so many other families that, we would never necessarily have been connected with, but now we're creating this online community, which we hope will eventually become a physical community. And in that, we are really meeting each other's needs. And it's been a great journey for 2 years. And like Kim, plan on doing it for many, many more as long as I have health and strength.
Thank you so much, Sherron. And I just really appreciate, you sharing a little bit about feeling overwhelmed in the beginning and then finding connection and also your journey around, as you mentioned, finding connection as it related to your experience with your son, but then also really finding the developing this community and responding to this need for Black parents to have something that, again, was like, additional sort of peer support within peer support. And so I really appreciate you sharing about that and your journey. So thank you. Kim, why don't we hear from you in terms of your experiences of what you've how you sought out peer support?
Yes, thank you. So everyone would have heard me say in my introduction that in my professional life, I'm a lawyer. And I think just by my nature, my best skills, I would say, would be to solve people's problems, help them through their difficulties, help them through whatever traumatic events that they're going through life. So when an event such as a diagnosis, and if most parents here tonight can probably relate to me, is probably one of the most traumatic events that we've had to live through. It's a very jarring event. It's a very shocking event. And mine occurred on November 30th, 2006. And at the time when my oldest of the two boys was diagnosed with Fragile X syndrome, I thought to myself, I'd done the research. I knew what it was. I knew what it was on paper. But I suddenly went home and knew nothing. And I remember, you have to remember that in that time, this was back in 2005, 2006, there was no Facebook. I think I had a flip phone, maybe. I fought the cell phone craze very hard. But I happened to go on the Fragile X Research Foundation of Canada website. And I remember there was this little chat box and it had said parent chat. And I thought I'd click on it and I was able to type in a little message. And the message I typed was there anybody here from Ontario? And for some reason, my brain could not compute that there would be other people in Ontario living this, because I felt so alone in that moment. And I just felt like it was me and my child. And at this point, my other child had not been diagnosed yet. That comes 2 months later. So I happened to get a response from a lady, Jennifer, who continues to be a very dear friend. And she lived in Rouge Hills out of Scarborough. And she was in the same level of diagnosis as me. And we started to connect. And it was at the time where when you got an email, you got a little ding on your computer and you ran and you opened it and you waited for it to open. And we now laugh about it because it was such a significant period of time, because there was this lady out there that had these children that had the same, maybe little bigger ears and all these things that I started to see in her children. So we became so incredibly attached. And through her, she invited me to a Fragile X picnic. And it was a picnic that was being held at Variety Village. And that's what Sherron just spoke about. And these are very significant moments that I hope resonate with some of you. But I happened to go to this picnic and I sat there, and there was over 100 of us there, and all of our children were running around, and some were melting down and some were hanging onto our legs and others were enjoying the experience. But there was just this surreal moment of sitting in the park at Variety Village when I realized that all of these people had the exact same experience. Now, the difficulty was that I had to get back in my car and drive back to Timmins, and Timmins is 8 hours away from Toronto. So while I was connecting, I met a number of parents, and we had this nice little group, and we would joke that we were the ex-mamas, and we would email each other and we would connect, but they weren't people that I could just go for coffee with. And I fought it, and I just continued to practice law. But now I was faced with speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavior therapy. I had to take Mondays off. I had to stand in court when the judge would give me a court date of Monday morning at 10. I had to always tell them that I wasn't available Monday morning at 10. And it's just one of those moments when I just wanted to be in court. But there's always that moment where somebody has to ask, or I feel like I have to explain. It was probably me. I felt like I had to explain why I couldn't be in court at that period of time. So that became very difficult. I had reached out to somebody at one point, and I had been invited to a Pamper Me Day at a children's treatment center. I'm sorry, I'm just getting a bit of interference here. And I was invited to a Pamper Me Day where there were other mothers there. I think there were 10 of us. And we were invited. It was a wonderful, wonderful thought that the Children's Treatment Center had invited us to get our hair done and our toes and our fingers done. And I thought it was the silliest thing that I had been invited to. I wasn't somebody who got pedicures. I didn't get manicures. And I sat there, and I got there, and we got picked up in a limo, and I sat there, and we were sitting in these lazy boys. And I had looked over at the one mom that was sitting next to me, and they had served us mimosas. And they had given us the agenda for the day. And the mother had looked at me, and she had said, I don't even care what we're going to do here today. I just want to sit in this recliner and drink mimosas. And nobody else can understand that moment other than a mother of children with special needs. You just don't understand that moment. And a little bit later in the day, I connected with one of those mothers again. And I know she's listening tonight, but she's my friend Carol, and we've remained friends, and we're close to today. We went out for lunch yesterday, and you know what's so great about peer support? We don't have formalized peer groups here in Timmins. I've tried to have little autism groups, and then we meet, with other groups. And quite frankly, I was sick of talking about autism. I wanted someone to understand why I needed the night out. I wanted someone to understand how my day went without me having to explain it to them, but I didn't want to have to talk about it. I didn't want to have to go through it. So I just want to give you an example. I had lunch yesterday with my friend Carol, and we talked about meds, and we talked about behaviors, and we talked about the Access Better Living Agency. But you know what else we talked about? We talked about how we both wanted to get on a boat and never come back. And we talked about if I ever went missing, not to come look for me. I'll come back at some point. And we laughed and we got it. And I just want the message to go out to those of you who are listening. You're always going to get the best friend, the sister-in-law, the mom, the coworker who's going to tell you, I get it. And they probably do. And they're probably a little bit more empathetic than the average Joe, but they don't get it. They don't get the 24/7 stress. And I don't just mean medical stress. I just mean stress. And I've realized over the years, and those who may be listening who know me know that this is not something that I like to admit. I'm not a sharer of emotion. I'm just not a crier. And I'm not somebody who wants to burden other people. I want to fix other people. I want to help other people. So when I reach out to people and I say, I need you, or I need to talk, find those people, because those are the people that are going to help you get through the day-to-day. And the organizations are wonderful, and you're going to identify, and that's where you're going to meet those people. But find a blend of the formalized peer group, and then find that peer group that you could text at 2 a.m, who may or may not answer your text. Who cares? Just let yourself vent and let it come out. So for me, it was a bit of a struggle to get to the point of realizing that I needed peer groups. But more importantly, as my children got older and I grew through all of these experiences, I realize now that many younger families are reaching out to me. And a lot of younger families are seeking out not just my direction on where to apply for funding and where to do these things, but how to feel and how to get rid of the guilt of when you feel a way that society may not think you should feel. So I think at the end of the day, my journey through peer support has gone up and down and has had maybe a little bit more valleys than peaks. And some of my friends would probably invite me more up to the peak sometimes. But I think it's just crucial. I couldn't imagine going through this without peer support. And I had made a comment in our practice round that these are connections that we'll never forget. I'll never forget the name Betty Daly. I'll never forget the name Sherron Grant. I'm going to remember you forever because we had this joint connection. We had this, this joint experience. And it's something that lives within us always. So if those of you who are listening ever question who you can reach out to, find one of these organizations, find Betty's organization, find Sherron's organization, reach out to us, find us on Facebook, find us somewhere, but connect to somebody, because if not, some of these days can be incredibly excruciating and overwhelming.
Wow, thank you, Kim. That was really powerful, in terms of your sharing. And I just really appreciate you telling us so much about your journey. And I heard so many commonalities of things that Sherron and Betty also talked about around kind of overwhelmed and feeling isolated, and then trying to find your group or your people that really just got it. And what I hear you speaking about is the importance of people who, you can really be yourself with without having to explain it, and really connect with them or find connection and support in a way that, as you say, might be different things at different times, or might be different things at different times in your journey. So thank you for sharing all of that in terms of your experience along the way, and how it might benefit folks who are listening here today or considering it. I wonder, Betty, do you have anything else you want to add about kind of what you think would be the benefits for people who maybe are considering or trying to think about joining peer support or aren't sure? Is there anything you wanted to add there?
Well, I think what Kim said is correct. We have all, it doesn't matter who you are, thought about, I live by the Thousand Islands, and I go by the Thousand Islands Bridge to the United States regularly. And I think all it would take is one pull of the steering wheel and I would cross that bridge. Mm. And I think that is not something to take lightly. No. Because the amount of stress that families are under is enormous. And I think professionals are professionals. They bring a view, and like the person who supports me is a very nice woman. Mm-hmm. I don't know that she has children, and she is young. And, there is an expectation that professionals know best. When Brenda was young and in school, I walked, and we had done some work with a psychologist. I walked by the door when he was doing his notes, and I heard him say, Betty is unwilling to talk about her family life. And it's not that I was unwilling to talk about I talked about my family life with whoever wants to hear. Right. He's in a different role. Mm-hmm. And he really has no business understanding or talking about my family life. I don't, professionals tend to tell you what they think versus, I was told for about 10 years that I needed a host family because I needed respite. And I said, sure, yeah, I think that sounds great. And I had this poor person looking for a host family for me for almost 10 years. And in the end, and I just kept saying, well, no, that person's too far away. Well, no, that person I don't think is a good match. And in the end, it wasn't any of that. It was, I didn't want it. Mm-hmm. But I was being told by professionals that I needed it. And so I've been around a long time. Professionals no longer tell me what I want or what's best for my daughter. Right. Brenda and I collaborate and figure out what's best for her. Because again, Brenda doesn't communicate very well. And I do some work with the colleges now, supporting some students on placement. And even the other day, a student said, this person's problems is because he has a poor family life. It's that perception that this person is aggressive because he has a poor family life. He has no structure in his home. And I had to say, you have no idea what's going on in that family. Right. You have to be careful about judging a family and judging them based on information that you don't have. I've done lots of presentations over the years. I'm a fairly open book, but there is always something I don't share. Right. Because I'm not willing to share it. So professionals should never think that they know everything that there is to know. And some of the people who supported me, I'd worked with for 15, 20, 25 years, and they still didn't know everything about my life. Right. Because you have to keep that separate.
I hear you, Betty, talking about really the difference, right, between, peers, what you might share with peers and what you might seek out or share with professionals, and drawing that line, and, and sort of bringing it back and circling it back to, I think what I hear you talking about is the benefits of really peer support in a way that you might be able to share a bit more freely in a way that is a bit different. So
there's lots of benefits to paid support. I get paid support.
Yes,
without paid support.
Yeah.
But there is a difference.
Yeah.
Even the person who has supported my daughter for almost 30 years would never say that she's Brenda's friend.
Right.
She is in a paid role. Brenda lives with her now.
Right.
She is in a paid role.
Right.
Now, she is not paid for her time, but there is a difference. And I think for people to understand that difference.
Thank you, Betty. Yes. And I wonder, Sherron, if you want to add anything around sort of what you see as some of the benefits. You've touched on a little bit, but some of the benefits that you have experienced from peer support and how it's, your words that you would want to share with the group of what they can get out of it, or why it's important.
Sure. Raising or caring for a loved one with a disability, it's a marathon. It's a long road. Mm-hmm. And along that road, and Kim alluded to this earlier, there are peaks and there are valleys. I remember, again, the two ladies I was sharing about earlier that kind of got me on this journey of getting my son diagnosed in the first place and pushed me in that direction. I remember the one, actually, they both have children with challenges, not necessarily developmental, like learning disabilities, some attentional issues, and so on. So still challenging. And I remember the one mom saying to me, there's going to be different points along the journey where you're going to grieve. The first time is when you get that diagnosis because, let me just hold it together. Because, all those hopes and dreams that you had for your child now have to change. Not that they're gone, but the expectation has to change. You don't not have expectation, but maybe the expectations you have, those are just not going to be realistic anymore. So that's the first kind of grieving point. And then it continues at certain milestones. When they become a teenager, my son, he'll never drive. I wonder, will he ever have a life partner? I'm still at the stage where I'm trying to figure out, will he ever be able to live on his own? He finished high school. He unfortunately didn't have the abilities to get credits, again, so there's a spectrum of exceptionalities. And I'm sure the people who are on this call, this evening, or those who'll be watching at another time, their child, may be able to go to university, but even at that, they may be able to go to university, but then it's still difficult to get employment, still difficult to keep employment. So unfortunately, there can be a lot of grieving along that route. To do that on your own, it's just not healthy. I know people, they grind it out, they push through. Again, a lot of us moms, it's almost how we're socializing in some cultures. And I would say, the Black culture, it's, we don't have time to cry and to kind of lick our own wounds. We have to keep going and keep fighting and keep pushing. And that's difficult, and that can take a toll. Having peer support, having a support network, large or small, formal or informal, that's good for your mental health, your wellness, your spiritual health, your spiritual wellness. That can maybe give you that extra juice, that extra gas, that extra strength to keep going. I hear you, Betty. I hear you, those really dark points. And those are places that a lot of us don't talk about, except people who get it. Those dark points where you think about what's going to happen to your child when you're gone. And you think about who's going to take care of them. If you're a person of faith, I've shaken my fist at God. I'll say that very openly. I've shaken my fist at God. Why me? Why him? Why us? Why this? Why can't it get better? But it's life. We're all dealt a hand, and we have to roll with it. But again, like the saying goes, when you get lemons, you make lemonade. And I think, the ladies here, Kim and Betty, that's what we've learned to do is, okay, life has dealt us some sour lemons. What can we do with this? And we get it where sometimes, you know, you don't know what to do with it. You kind of feel like giving up. But I'm hoping that the people who are on tonight are here because they know they can't. And they're just looking for, where can I get that extra source of strength, that extra source of life to keep me going? So I know for me, there was that Community Living Toronto group. And again, I, like the ladies here, I bump into them at different functions. And it's like years have not gone by, and we reconnect and we talk about how our kids are doing and where they're going and how we got through the pandemic and all those kinds of things. It's like time didn't move. It's like time stood still. And then we move on again till we bump into each other again at another event, because there's a special bond in these groups because we get it. We get it, regardless of our socioeconomics, regardless of our faith, regardless of our cultural backgrounds. There's a basic foundation that we all have in common. And then we find the other group where we really feel like this is our fit. This is where we can wear this group like a glove, and we feel comfortable in it, where we can take that support on a deeper level, on a more intimate level. So that's how I see the importance of peer support groups, formal or informal. Find someone. Because this road it's too difficult, it's too challenging, it's too emotional to go it all alone. And no, we're not Wonder Woman, we're not Superman, we're human, and we need to understand that and embrace that. And I think in doing that, we'll be better for our loved ones on a whole.
Well, thank you, Sherron. I think that's a sort of a lovely place to land, before we move to Q&A. I think that you've really wrapped it up there in terms of bringing together all of the key parts, of everything that we've talked about here in this webinar, in terms of the isolation, how overwhelming it can be, how dark it can get, how hard, but also that you can find your group that fits you like a glove, because that will get you through all those difficult times. So thank you, Sherron, Kim, Betty. That's just been like really incredible to hear from you tonight. And I think we're going to see if we have any questions from the audience. Hey, Katie?
Yes, thank you, Bianca. And thanks again to Kim, Betty, and Sherron for sharing your personal experiences and approaches to peer support. I know we've had lots of great comments in the chat box. So as a reminder to folks, if you do have a question for our panelists, please put that into the chat box. Feel free to type it in and we'll ask it to folks. We've got about 10 minutes before we wrap up this evening. One of the questions that has come through is, are support networks numerous in Ontario? And who or what organization helps to set them up? So maybe I'll invite Betty to start off. If we can we only have about 10 minutes and a couple of questions. So if there's a way that we can sort of provide a little bit of insight into how the networks exist and how many of them there are, that would be great.
Sure. Family Alliance Ontario has about, I haven't counted them, but about 20 networks across the province. There isn't a lot of networks up north, but there are networks across the province, all the way from, one end of the province to the other. And they are linked to Family Alliance Ontario. So if you go onto our website, you can see some of the networks from across the province. We would also help networks if they wanted to start new networks. That is part of what we do. We are a volunteer board. We have no staff. So it's parents helping parents, siblings helping siblings or parents. We're just a group of family members who are committed to the whole idea of creating and strengthening family networks.
That's great. Thank you, Betty. I think that's helpful for folks to know how Family Alliance Ontario operates, in that it is this really grassroots driven approach to things, and it comes from really passionate people wanting to establish these networks in their own communities. So we will be sharing, as a reminder to folks, we will be sharing this webinar recording, but also these really important resources that have been mentioned throughout the evening. So websites and contact information, if that's okay with our panelists, we will be sending all of that out to folks after the webinar. Just to let people know, Bianca mentioned this earlier, the Ontario Caregiver Organization also offers peer support across the province. So we have virtual support groups and one-to-one peer support. We can send that information out to all of you after the webinar as well. But I'm wondering, Sherron, if you want to comment on that question about how many groups exist and how do they start? Because you and your spouse have started this wonderful organization, and it's separate from Family Alliance Ontario, but still has some commonalities in terms of the purpose.
Yeah, no problem. Again, like Family Alliance Ontario, we're also grassroots driven. We just recently hired one staff person as a result of being the happy recipients of a Ontario Trillium grant. So we're very excited about that. But really, it's my husband and myself just out of our own desire just to support other Black families. So right now it's virtual, and so we don't have chapters or little mini networks across Ontario yet. That is a dream of ours. We've only been around since November 2020, so we don't have as much of the history as Family Alliance Ontario. But again, we are always open to receiving new membership. We're growing. We are looking to get a board of directors and looking towards charitable status. And as the need continues to be there and as families continue to request our services and our supports, we will be there. And we're really just about, I think, again, like Betty shared, really about empowering families, just being a resource, just kind of being there for them, that again, that they know those couple of times a month, there's a space where they can go and they can share and talk. And it's not always about our children's disabilities. Sometimes it's just about being together. So that's really what Sawubona is all about.
That's wonderful. That's great. Thank you, Sherron. So another great example of how a grassroots initiative from really passionate people who don't have a ton of time, but a lot of passion can bring a group of people together to really get some wonderful support. We have a couple of minutes left, and I'm wondering if maybe I'll throw this next question to you, Kim. Given your professional background, but also all of the work you do with your children and the work with your organization, sometimes what I hear from caregivers when I chat with them in community is when there's opportunity for support, like support groups, peer support, one-to-one, whatever that might be, there's a little reluctance, there's a little hesitancy. Sometimes I'll say, how long did it take for you to get here? And they'll be like, oh, I heard about this 3 years ago, but I just never made it until now. And a lot of times folks say, because they just aren't really sure what they're going to walk into. When they walk into that room or make that phone call, they're just not really sure what those rules of engagement are, what that sort of system or process looks like when you walk into these groups. And I'm wondering if you can kind of share in a more practical way what people can expect, as we know a lot of our audience has never done peer support before. So as a new person to this, what might they expect if they walk into a group of parents or caregivers like themselves, or join a one-to-one program? If you can comment a little bit about those logistics.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things that people can expect is, number one, like Sherron touched upon, they're going to find really human people. And I think what happens is that when people are reaching out to professionals, or you reach out to doctors or all these other people, they have a certain air about themselves and they have a certain role, like Betty touched upon. But when you reach out to these peer groups, or, whether it's one-on-one or in a group, they're not going to meet any judgment. They're going to feel that. They're going to feel it. They're going to feel that there's no judgment. And you have to remember that a lot of us, I know I was one of those people. I have 2 children with developmental disabilities. They're not mild. They're probably moderate to severe. But I think sometimes there are the days where I downplay it. And I think to myself, why am I doing this? There's other people that are worse. And so-and-so's child can't walk, and so-and-so's child has cancer. And so you feel like, why am I here? And that gives you that sense of guilt again. But if you spend 3 minutes with people that have these very similar experiences in these peer groups, that's going to go away. And I think that that's really, really, that's what you can expect. The other thing that you're going to be able to expect is maybe you're not going to get the formal presentation on you're going to apply for this, you're going to apply for that, you're going to apply for this, you're going to apply for that, but you're going to have that discussion. So in my professional life, I provide a lot of hints and trusts to families. I provide a lot of guardianship applications to families. I know there are other law firms out there. I think, whatever they charge, whatever they do, I'm sure they're wonderful at it. I equate it more to some kind of volunteer, cover my costs, and I'll do it. But I'll tell you why I'm bringing this up, and it's not to mention my business, but it's to say that a lot of people will call me and they'll say, "Well, Kim, somebody told me I needed a Henson Trust, but I'm not really sure I need that. Do I need it?" Because there's still that level of, I think people are, I wouldn't say embarrassed, but they're still not sure. Like, am I a part of that group? Am I not a part of that group? Am I limiting my child by saying that I'm going to do a Henson Trust? Am I, should I be encouraging it by just believing that they should just have like my other children? And that's another thing that you're going to get from peer groups. You're going to find that it's okay to have a child with a disability and a child without a disability, and be okay with that. And maybe you treat them different, maybe you don't, maybe you have to, but you're going to get that from a peer group. You're not going to get that in any other environment. You're just not going to get that. So I think that what people need to do, it's scary to talk to somebody, it's scary to be vulnerable. And I think that's another thing. If you're not a person that's naturally vulnerable, like I would not be naturally vulnerable, it's tough. So I think that if once you can let that go, when you outweigh the pros and cons, you're probably not even going to have a cons list. It's really what you need to do.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, it's sort of that next level of hearing from each other and feeling validated from each other, but also understanding like, yes, I can access this support, or getting encouragement from people who get it and who know it. And similar, it's great to hear from a professional, but sometimes it's better to hear it from your peers and from the people that walk in your shoes every day. We are at our time. We've had a couple questions that have come through about really specific things like, where can I get this in Hamilton, or where can I get this with this specific situation? And what I'm going to suggest to those folks is, when you get those resources after today, check out Family Alliance Ontario. They may have some supports in that community. We have our one-to-one peer support program where we can connect you with people with similar situations. So there are options out there for you. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to get that specific today and get into those specific questions, but please check those options out. So that is all the time that we have today. And I want to thank all of you again, Sherron, Betty, and Kim, for helping us better understand how peer support works, the benefits to participating in some kind of peer support, and providing some insight into different types of groups and options that are available across Ontario. So that does conclude our webinar for today. But before you go, you are going to find a link in our chat box to a survey. And as I mentioned at the beginning, if you complete this really brief survey, your name will be entered into a draw to win an OCO water bottle. And they're delightful and wonderful, and hydration is key to wellness. So please fill out that survey, and hopefully you'll be our lucky winner. So we do hope you can join us again. Our next webinar is going to be on October 27th, titled Improving Transitions from Youth to Adult Care, where we're going to be joined by Ontario Health to give us some great information about transition planning. And we also invite you to learn a little bit more about our other programs and services for caregivers too. So our SCALE program is back. We started a few weeks ago, but you can still sign up. You can still join us for that program. It provides psychoeducational webinars each week where you can get tools and strategies and resources to better cope with your caregiving experience. And we also offer free and confidential group or individual counseling sessions as another option to support that learning. And of course, as I've mentioned, we do have peer support programming for everyone as well. So we do offer online support groups at different times of day. And we also offer a one-to-one peer support program as well, where you can connect with somebody with a little bit more closer experience to your caregiving experience. So for more information, check out our website or give our helpline a call. And I want to thank everybody again and wish you all a wonderful rest of your evening. And we hope to see you again soon.